Okay, so this is a weird story. I was freaked out in the moment. But for a while I thought maybe I was just overreacting. It was almost 2 years ago, and I interviewed for a job that was in another state. It was about a 5-hour drive. Instead of driving home after the interview, my soon-to-be wife suggested that I find an Airbnb to stay at for the night. I'm hopeless when it comes to apps like this, and I have no idea how to find a good place. She downloaded the app for me, found a place that looked nice, and it was only about a 10-minute drive from where the interview was being held. I booked the spot and got myself ready for the interview. The guy who owned the house was really nice. I was messaging him about why I was coming down, and he told me that if I wanted to, I could get into the house early that day, so I could get myself ready and prepared for the interview, instead of driving for 5 hours and then going straight into the interview. I thought that was really nice. The owner sent me the code to get in and gave me all the instructions on how to lock the door. Well, it's literally one button, but still good to know since I had never used one of those keypad locks before this. My interview was at 3. I had more than enough time to shower and get myself mentally prepared for the interview. When I plugged in the interview address into the GPS, it said 9 minutes, so I planned on giving myself at least 30 minutes in case I got lost or hit traffic. After the interview, I grabbed some tacos and went back to the house. I thought the interview went well, but of course, I spent the next few hours second-guessing every answer I gave. I tend to do that when I'm nervous. I didn't do much of anything that night except eat, talk to my girl on the phone, and watch a movie. I know all these places are clean, but I still find it weird to sleep in someone else's bed. I'm just weird like that. It's why I don't travel a lot or go on vacation. I planned on sleeping on the couch and heading out first thing in the morning. The living room was cozy. It had a big fluffy wraparound couch that was in front of a fireplace. Above the fireplace was a huge TV, just to sweeten the deal. The room also had surround sound. I was perfectly content just staying in this room all night and watching movies until I dozed off and went to bed. Around 11 that night, I grabbed a blanket from one of the beds and I threw on Avengers Endgame. I was only about 15 minutes into the movie when I started to fall asleep. That sleep didn't last very long, as I was awoken by the sound of the doorbell. I just laid there for a few minutes and looked around. I didn't know if I was dreaming or if it was the movie or something. Then a few seconds later, the doorbell chimed again. I couldn't believe it. The doorbell was actually ringing. I grabbed my phone and saw that the time said 11. I couldn't imagine who would be ringing the doorbell at this hour. My first thought was just to ignore it. Then the bell rang again. Every time it rang, it made my heart basically jump out of my chest. At the 4th ring, I decided I was gonna go check it out. I was thinking to myself, what if it were like the police or something? I cautiously made my way to the door, and before opening it, I looked out the front windows. That gave me a somewhat view of the person. It was a skinny guy, and he was holding up a small brown bag in his hands. He had his head down and almost looked unresponsive. I went to the door and opened it, but left the screen door shut and locked. The light was dim, so I couldn't get a decent look at the guy, with his head still down. He told me he had my pizza delivery. Clearly, he wasn't holding a pizza. It was a brown paper bag. I politely told him I didn't order a pizza, and that he had the wrong address. I shut the door and started heading back to the living room. The doorbell rang again. I marched back to the front door and opened it. Before I could yell go away or anything, he just told me again, in a bleak and monotone voice, that he had my pizza. When I shouted, I didn't order a pizza, the guy responded by giving me the address of the house, and said the delivery was for this address. I started to shout that it was a mistake and I didn't order pizza. And while I was shouting, I noticed that the guy was grabbing the screen door handle. I know I should have been more freaked out, but I was just annoyed. I slammed the door after yelling at him to go away before I called the police. After I slammed the door, I snuck back to the front window and again crouched down to look at what this guy was doing. He stood there for another minute and walked away. He had a beat-up red sedan of some kind. I couldn't tell what the make was. One of the front headlights was busted. Once I saw him get into the car, I felt a moment of relief. After that ordeal, I was ironically hungry. I grabbed something from the kitchen, and as I was walking back to the living room, I saw lights still shining through the front windows. When I looked outside, this guy was still sitting in the driveway, with his one high beam shining through the window. I decided to go upstairs and look out one of the bedroom windows, since I would have a much better vantage point. Because the light was so bright, I couldn't see him sitting in the car, but I could see that the car was running. I was still more annoyed than anything else. My two thoughts were either calling the police or going outside and telling this guy to hit the road. I decided that I didn't want to bother the police with something that could be very small and maybe nothing. So instead, I'll just go outside and scare the guy into leaving. I threw my shoes on and marched out there like I was an Avenger. When I got to the window of the car, nobody was there. Without thinking, I turned around and ran back to the house. And immediately, I locked the door. I even locked the chain on top of the door. I was trying to ask myself why he wouldn't be in the car. But the car was still running. It didn't make sense to me. I grabbed my phone and went upstairs into the bedroom. I tried texting the owner of the house, but I didn't receive a message back from him right away. I continued to look out of the window for several minutes. I contemplated calling the police, but I kept telling myself that this isn't police-worthy, and I'm blowing all of this out of proportion. A few minutes later, I looked out the window, and I saw the skinny man get back into his car, and it almost looked like he was coming from the direction of the front door. I watched him finally back out of the driveway, and he appeared to drive down the street and out of sight. I wasn't scared, but I was so on edge that I didn't really sleep. I spent the entire night watching YouTube videos while lying on the floor of the bedroom. At 4 in the morning, I decided to officially get up, shower, and then leave. As I was gathering my things and getting ready to walk out the door, I noticed something horrible. The front door was unlocked and ajar. Because the chain was locked, it wouldn't open any further. I just stood in amazement. I couldn't remember if maybe I left it unlocked by accident. After the last incident, I was sure I locked it, but I didn't want to think about the potential alternative. Then it dawned on me that I for sure didn't lock the screen door when I ran inside. As the sun was rising, I made a run for my car, just in case. And as I was backing out of the driveway, I noticed on the side of the front porch was the brown paper bag. I ran outside so fast that I didn't even notice it initially. I thought about going to see if anything was inside. But that was a question that, in that moment, I didn't want answered. I drove away, and at the end of the street was a disgusting greenhouse. And in the driveway was an ugly red car with what looked like a broken headlight. It may be a coincidence, but it looked exactly like the car that sat in the driveway the previous night. The owner of the Airbnb messaged me that morning to apologize for missing my message last night and asked how the stay was. I told him about the delivery driver, the car in the driveway, the unlocked door in the morning, and the similar-looking red car at the end of the street. He started typing because I could see the dots in the message. And then he never responded after that. I never bothered to look more into the situation until I started telling people the story. When I looked up the house more recently, it's not listed on Airbnb anymore, so I don't know what to think. It was unnerving and a little freaky for sure, but I truly wasn't that scared. I'm more scared now when I think about it, because other people seem to think that this was almost some kind of setup. I'm curious to see what people think, if it all could have been just a crazy string of coincidences, or if I was almost a victim of something sinister.